So if you haven't heard me talk about prepdish.com, then this might be the first Hey Girl episode you've ever listened to. Here's what you need to know. Life is full. I don't care if you're a mom, an empty nester, you got littles. It's just the nature of our calendars, the schedules, all the things. And so I'll be totally honest, we have been eating so much healthier these days, and I'm feeling way better than I did even a month ago. And so I want to encourage all of my listeners, maybe you're in that place where you're like, okay, I need to eat healthier. Maybe you've been eating really healthy, but you're like, the whole process is just really overwhelming, from planning meals to figuring out what to buy at the grocery store, to recipes, to preparation. I'm telling you, prepdish.com is totally here to help. If you go to prepdish.com/heygirl, you're gonna get a free trial. So here's the thing, it's free. Why not give it a try? Once you sign up, they're gonna send you an entire week's worth of recipes, a whole meal plan. You can do paleo, you can do gluten-free. It's gonna give you the shopping list. It's gonna give you all of the steps for preparation. It literally is going to take all of the hard brain space that we need for other things out of the mix. And so prepdish.com/heygirl, absolutely give it a try. I am telling you, just eating healthier for the last month has cleared up so much of the fog in my brain, and makes us do everything better. So give it a try. Let me know what you think. Go to prepdish.com/heygirl for your 2-week free trial.
Hey girls, and welcome to season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
Good morning and welcome back to Hey Girl. Happy Monday morning, or whatever day you happen to be listening to this on. I am so excited for the interview to come, and the backstory is kind of fun, but it might be you had to be there for it to be as fun for you as it was for me. But I will tell you that I went into this interview really having no idea who Jenn was or anything about her story. I totally could have looked it up if I was on my game and not running around like a crazy person this last week. But in true transparency, I walked in just on the fly, excited to meet her and interview her, but really just like, I have no idea. We're going to see where this goes. And it was such a God thing, because to be honest, you can't see me in the interview, but I figure I should just own it. I did not have time to shower that day, do my hair, no makeup. I was just kind of a hot mess. But I immediately was able to connect with Jenn on just a real friendship level, as she's so down to earth and just somebody that's really easy to talk to and to laugh with. I cannot wait for someday to actually be able to be in person, sitting down with her over coffee, chatting, and just hearing all about her life and the things that God's doing through her story. But you're going to get to hear a whole bunch here. Here's what was funny for me in meeting her. I did not make the connection that she was Sandi Patty's daughter until she mentioned it. If you don't know who Sandi Patty is, don't worry about it. She'll talk about it. But she was a singer that I definitely grew up remembering from our gospel music days back. We lived in Nashville for a while when I was a kid, and just my parents, definitely I remember Sandi Patty's voice. Whether it was a tape player or CD, I don't remember. I definitely knew of her. And so I love the fact that I think of Sandi Patty as someone, especially my mom, just really enjoyed listening to. And it was so fun to get to sit with her daughter and talk. Like, it felt like a daughter to daughter kind of get together. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. Gosh, Jenn is like the girl that you're just going to want to be friends with. And I love her story. I, as always, appreciate the transparency that she shows as she just walks us through. And I just left feeling, honestly, encouragement. Like, that is the greatest word. I left feeling just so encouraged after talking to her. So grab a cup of coffee, whatever your favorite hot drink is, sit back and enjoy this conversation with Jenn Crider.
I'm Jenn, and I am 30, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee currently, and I've lived here for about 8 years or so, and I work full-time at a church, and my husband works at the same church, Christ Church Nashville, here in Nashville, and we have a 2-year-old. I am originally from Indiana, actually. I grew up in Anderson, Indiana, a really small town there. My parents were both in ministry way before I was born. I grew up kind of in full-time ministry. My mom is a singer, and she's a gospel singer. Her name is Sandy Patty. Some people might know who she is. Some people might not. She toured pretty extensively when I was born and grew up on a tour bus. And that was just kind of the norm for us. We didn't really know much different. But what I love is that we were in a really small town. So when we came home, it was not a big deal. And we were at public school, and it was like, normal life. I loved kind of that balance. And looking back, I think, wow, what a tremendous gift that was. I guess kind of going back to the younger years, there were some pretty significant things that happened in that season that I think continually shape who I am. So my dad was the manager and my mom sang, and it was just kind of all about our lives at that stage. But my parents got a divorce at the age of 4. Divorce is a traumatic thing for any kid, and especially at 4, you don't really understand what that all means. And it kind of happened abruptly, but to a 4-year-old, anything's abrupt. Oh, yeah. And so me and my 3 other siblings, we started going back and forth, and they both stayed in the same town, which was helpful. But because my mom was a Christian singer, and, divorce was a pretty big shock to the country in a lot of ways. Her divorce, it was kind of very quickly, she was kind of very quickly cast out of a lot of those Christian circles and stopped touring and stopped making records for a while. And so just lots of shifts, not only in divorce, but just, I think with my parents also learning to find their identities in a new season as well. I think now being a parent, I have a whole different lens of what that must have looked like for them at the time. I had 3 siblings. I'm a twin, actually. I have a twin brother who is 6'4" and has red hair, and I'm like 5'4" and have brown hair. And he we look nothing alike. He's like a beanpole, and I'm not. And but yeah, he's amazing. And so I'm a twin. And then my 2 other sisters, we went back and forth. But then soon my mom remarried and remarried somebody that had kind of been in our life for a season. He was one of her backup singers. And he had 3 kids. And so all of a sudden, kind of within a year or 2 of the divorce, maybe, they got married and blended families, 7 kids together. And then soon after that, they adopted another kid. And so there were 8 kids under the age of 12, which I'm like, how did you do that? So lots and lots of change kind of in those early years.
Wait, did you say under the age of 12?
Yes. So it's crazy because there were 5 of us within 2 years of each other, I think, just with how all the ages worked together. So it was crazy. I mean, I truly can't imagine what that was like.
Were you 4? Where did you fall in that age?
Yeah, I think once we adopted my youngest brother, I would have been 7 or 8, I guess, at that point. So it was like the ages were like the oldest was 12, 8, 8, 8, 7, 6, 4. And then a newborn. Craziness.
I just want to give your mom like a gold star or free ticket to get a massage. I don't know.
She says, now when she speaks places, and especially with women, she, kind of tells about all the kids and the close age ranges. And she says, so for all of you moms in the thick of it, just let that be your happy thought, that there's not 8 under the age of 12. Which, yes, is a lot. And so, navigating being from a broken home, navigating step siblings, navigating identity, navigating change of jobs for parents. My dad remarried as well. They didn't end up having any kids, but just, lots of things. And with 8 kids, we all kind of dealt with that in different ways. Another kind of important fact about just this story that really shaped me a lot is, and I can't remember the exact year, but people kind of still knew who my mom was. And right before the divorce, even in secular worlds, she's got kind of a really big operatic voice and sang for presidential inaugurations and all kinds of different things, the Statue of Liberty, rededication. And so even some kind of people in the secular worlds knew who she was. And so after my parents got remarried to different people, but a TV crew came and they wanted to interview us, and they kind of told us that they were going to interview us based on what it's like to be a blended family, and which is great, right? Because at that time too, that was a big norm for a lot of people and somewhat of a new wave of that. And so my parents kind of thought this could be a good thing. It turned out that it was one of the major networks. I can't remember if it was ABC or NBC, but it was for one of the major shows, kind of like a 20/20, 60 Minutes, something like that.
Gotcha.
It ended up being kind of an expose that my mom and stepdad actually had an affair, and that kind of led to the divorce, and then they got remarried. And this was all news to us kids. So, as a kid in that stage, and I was, I think, in the 4th grade then, that was news to us and just overwhelming. And how do you even explain to kids that young what that even means? And they had to kind of air all the dirty laundry to us, kind of forced to do that. And that, led to a lot of hurt. And then again, looking back now with a different lens, not that I agree with those decisions, I think I can say that. But I see just what a hard situation that was for everybody. And immediately felt like, even as kids, that everybody was looking at us and everybody kind of knew all the details of who we were. And some of that anonymity of being in a small town wasn't there as much anymore. And it just was a hard season. And even now, I really don't remember a ton from like 4th grade and under. I think, there are things that I've worked through in counseling a lot, but that definitely, shapes who you are in a lot of ways. And so again, there's 8 kids and we all kind of dealt with that information in different ways. Kind of fast forward a little bit to now, a lot of us have done really extensive counseling, and we still need to do that, to see that probably season, especially when that kind of television expose came out, was probably the lowest point for our family, at least for us kids. But then looking where we are now, I really never thought that we would be a family who wanted to be together, who loved each other, who like fiercely fought for each other, who just really care about that God can use every aspect of our story. And maybe there's a gift that our story can be Googled to where there's nothing to hide and we can talk honestly and openly. And for some of us kids now, that we're kind of in our 20s and 30s, we get a chance a lot to talk with other people who've gone through divorce, or on both sides, or parents that we know who have gone through divorce and have younger kids, and they're talking to us like of what was our perspective as kids, and they know that we can talk freely. And we're learning there's some sort of a gift in that, which seemed like the worst thing ever, that everybody knew everything about us at that season. So for me, how I kind of processed just some of that trauma of some of my early years was to really run away from my family emotionally, not physically, but I just kind of, the story that I told myself was, it's not okay to trust this family, and so I'm going to find my identity elsewhere. And so I threw myself into church. Was a big thing. Church was also a hard thing because, it's fascinating how quick we are to attribute decisions parents make to to the kids and how kids get the repercussions of that. I have many memories of being really bullied at a certain church from a youth group there. And I think it's that, kids don't know how to process any of this information, and so, but just really hard kind of seasons and feeling like that we were not good enough to be part of the church because of decisions that we didn't make, and so that caused some of my siblings to very much run away from the church and run away from God. For me, I just ended up finding a community within a different church that we ended up going to, and really found community there and found purpose there that I just now look back as kind of the grace of God. That although it wasn't necessarily a healthy response to trauma, to just totally throw myself into something else and pretend like almost my family didn't exist, the consequences of that probably somewhat unhealthy choice were not as maybe severe as other consequences could have been. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I love school. I really was intense with school, and I loved youth group and just church in general. And so I just threw myself as fully as I could be there. My goal was to just kind of be at home as little as possible and not invest there. My mom told me now, after we've done a lot of work together, and we're very, very close now. But she said, when we told you guys about the divorce when I was 4, she said, I remember you just cried and cried and cried and cried. And then some point in the day you stopped, and she said, and Jen, I didn't see you cry for years. You were 4. You kind of just learned in that moment to shut yourself off. And even now I'm still learning how to continually unlock those places in myself and say, it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to love and know that there's great risk in that. So I was super involved in church and in school and just kind of found some identity there. And I had an incredible youth pastor. His name's Ben Hardman, and he just kind of saw something in me when I was in middle school, and he kind of forced me to be on a worship team. And I didn't want to do that because also I really did not want to be associated at that season with my mom's legacy. I think I just kind of put so many things in categories of this is bad and this is good, or I didn't want to go where certain things might lead, or I don't know what it was. I just kind of tried to do anything else besides music. And he just really saw something in me, and he would, make CDs of songs for me to listen to. He would force me to be on the worship team kind of. And I was terrified of the mic and I didn't want to sing, and he just kind of kept investing in me. And we'd be at youth conferences, and there'd be a female worship leader, and he would say watch her. And I would. And I wouldn't tell other people that I really loved learning about singing and learning about worship, our corporate expression of worship. But I loved it. And so I spent all my time studying. My stepdad says he remembers me just being up in my room, because I never would come out and engage with everybody as much, but I would be in my room just listening to some of the, female worship leaders at the time, and just listen to everything they said, everything they did, and just soaked it all in. Got really involved, especially in worship throughout high school at my church. And then my senior year of high school, I got a call very randomly to help lead worship for this girls conference called the Revolve Tour. It was kind of the daughter company of Women of Faith. And so Women of Faith traveled around for a long time. And Women of Faith was one of the most pivotal things in our family story, because kind of right before I got the call about to sing on the Revolve Tour, my mom had started coming to the Women of Faith conferences, and they wanted her to sing and to speak. And she had written a book at the time, and it was very honest. Again, all of our stuff was out there. So she was in the process of healing and processing that information and being able to begin to speak about it publicly and kind of let others they were into the trauma of our story. And so now maybe let them into the healing of our story. And
Can I ask, I'm just following your story. When that expose, the news story came out, up to that point, was it pretty much people around you knew what even you as a 4-year-old were aware of? And that was really a breaking story for for everyone involved, or was it more kids suddenly became aware of the details of all of the divorce and everything, and other people kind of knew? I don't even remember back then to the news story, so I don't know. But
that's a great question, and I don't know if I know the answer. I think a lot of people might have put dots together, perhaps. I think it was a shock to most people, and it's also such an interesting dynamic of what we do to kind of quote unquote Christian celebrities and even like megachurch pastors or things like that. We sometimes praise the talent over the person. Mm-hmm. And that can become really dangerous when it's not in check. Another lens I'm kind of learning about is how so quick we are to people who have incredible talents or incredible callings, but we sometimes thrust people into positions before they're ready, and we put them on this platform that's unsustainable for anyone. Yeah. And when they fall, and then there's also this weird mixture of not delights. This might be like too much. No. Like we knew that you couldn't, you had to be like us. So like also then there's this weird dynamic in church culture as we keep things so secret, not as much anymore, but I think especially a few decades ago, we keep things so secret that there's no place to talk about anything, even talking about like AA tried to start in a church and people just wouldn't have it for a while, because that then when maybe somebody else quote unquote falls, then there is this kind of feeling like, oh, you are just one of us. But we kind of point fingers and make that this somehow big example. But ultimately, it's then enforcing that, no, we can't talk about the things happening in our own lives. Yeah. Does that make any sense at all? I don't.
No, absolutely. You actually, I want to say it's a Christine Kane quote where she talks about be careful not to build your platform bigger than or greater than your character can sustain you.
Yes.
And it's that idea of, talent can take you to a lot of places. And I think you're absolutely 100% right that people push us up there. And then when there's a fall, it's amazing how we love to sing. Think about the musician side. We sing about grace. And then that very person singing, we're like, oh, this is beautiful. We're singing about grace. And then when they need it most, we're the first to start throwing stones.
Yes.
And I don't know, maybe some of that is our human nature that we want to keep people from seeing our own junk. And so it's so much easier to be like, well, look at their junk. And like they were supposed to be this big hotshot. And somehow it weirdly makes us feel better about our own shortcomings rather than just all kind of coming together in the first place and saying, hey, we're all broken. Like that's just in that we all share the same platform. My husband says the quote, I love it, that the ground at the foot of the cross is all level. Like there's it's not slanted. Like we all come in the same place. So I hear you. And it absolutely makes sense.
It's such an interesting dynamic kind of within the church. And again, goes back to, I think now so many of us, especially the kids, are seeing that our story is actually opening doors for other people to be really honest with their story, and that's a gift. And so although we have like, some scars from that, the freedom that it's giving other people to begin to like maybe talk about their own stories is a beautiful thing. And so I think that the culture is shifting, and even though it's the social media culture can so much be this like filtered life, there's also so many circles that are really being honest about that it's not all roses and it's not all perfect, and that it can be both. And I love that. I think for a while I love just the idea that it can be both and. Even in my own journey of trying to kind of run away from the bad and the good of my family's legacy, now I'm learning that like both are they've shaped who I am, and that's the legacy that I stand in. And I can be Jenn and also Sandy Patty's daughter, and both of those things don't have to make the other one less. On the other side of healing of different things, still working on healing in other areas of my life. And there will certainly still be other things that come along that I need to begin walking through healing, and all of those can coexist at the same time. And I don't have to put myself on this pedestal that it has to be all perfect. I think there's this gift that in a lot of the church circles that I'm kind of in now that is kind of freeing conversation to be much more honest and not stuff so hidden in the dark, because and just reminding us that we are not as alone as we might think we are, and the dark places in our life might not be as impenetrable as we think that they might be when we're just forced to deal with them alone. But when we can see that other people are walking through something, it frees us up to be okay with our own stories. Does that make any sense?
You are like preaching the Hey Girl model, right? But no, it's true. I mean, people being vulnerable, it brings a level of freedom to people as they walk their own journeys. And so, yeah, I think it's beautiful. What is the name of so now I need to know the name of your mom's book really quickly.
Well, there's been several now. So the first one was called Broken on the Back Row, and it's that was the first one. And then she actually is just now releasing a new one that I think it's like coming out in the next month or something, that is probably even more kind of all encompassing. If you read all of her books, you kind of see like where she was at different points,
Gotcha.
But that Broken on the Back Row book, spoiler alert, is about kind of the church that we started going to, that she started going to, and then we really found connection at that youth group. The pastor kind of chose to face everything really head on with such grace and kindness. And the first Sunday that my mom came, she like put us in our kids' classes, and she just sat on the back row and just was crying. And, the pastor at the end said something that she kind of thought, oh gosh, this is going to be like making the guests stand up. And, and she was like, I don't want to stand up. I don't want anybody to know my name. And so he kind of said, like, if you want somebody, like, if you've been here and this is your first time and you want somebody to know your name, we desperately want to know your name. We want to connect you. We want to find a place for you to be connected here, and we want to know who you are. But if you want to just sit in the back row and all you've done this service is sit in the back row and cry, and you don't want anybody to even know you're here, that you are still seen by God. And he says he never knew she was there, but it was just kind of this beautiful, like, kind of prophetic word of for her, and it became a really safe haven for us. But down the road, he ended up having, I don't know if the book talks about this, but he kind of spoke on the woman in Jesus, and who has he without sin, cast the first stone. Yeah. And he had a bucket of rocks and just addressed the situation really head on for mom, and really talked about that she's in the process of healing. It's not just saying like, okay, whatever, that happened, I'm moving on, but like really trying to begin to walk out in restoration with our whole family. And he, most people don't have to have that exposed to everybody, but she did. And so he then even just had the bucket of rocks there and like kind of told the story in this beautiful way, and kind of brought her up and said, like, this is a chance. Like, I know all of you guys know what happened, and I know that there are whispers and all kinds of things, but this is a practical opportunity for us to be reminded of that woman caught in adultery, and you without sin cast the first stone. And we weren't in the room that day, but I hear, even now, just kind of my mom recall that, and what a beautiful, tender, powerful, important thing for a pastor to do. And that was a turning point kind of in our lives, I think, as well, because it was finally a place where we could be safe to begin the process of healing. And so then the Women of Faith kind of came into our lives sometime when I was in high school, and they invited her in. And my mom said she went to the first one, and she just assumed she'd sing at the first one, and then they'd get calls, and they would, she'd get a nice call from the director saying, we loved having you, but probably not again. And the call never came, and they kept asking her to come back, and they kept really wanting to know who she was. And this is stuff none of us really had experienced in Christian culture, which is such a shame, And they just started to pour into her and create this safe space for her to heal in a lot of ways. And they brought, every time we would come in, us kids would come in like, oh, it's going to make me cry. The speakers, and these are some of the, top speakers of the Christian world at that time, especially, each of them would make a point to come to us kids and like ask how we were. Like, we were not Sandy Patty's kids. Like, we were, our own selves and with our own stories that was affected by that, but that they were our personal thing. And they just gave us such permission there to be real and raw and honest and find a space and ask questions and all of that. So Women of Faith, really, all of us say it was such a turning point in our entire family's life, because it began to give us voice to what had happened and a space to talk about it. But then also it gave us hope that we didn't have to stay only in the trauma, but we also didn't have to pretend that the trauma didn't exist. And so that continued as I sang and led worship on the Revolve tour, and it was with some of the same people. And that was just so much healing for me took place in those years. And so all through college, I was in college full time, but I was in classes Monday through Thursday, and then I'd fly out Friday and go to the conference, and then fly back on Sunday. So just like a weird college experience, but so beneficial. It to me, because I grew up in all the 10% that people see in the music industry of like, oh, it's so amazing, it's so wonderful. Like, I didn't care about the 10% of stuff that people see and think is awesome. Like, I knew all the 90% that's really hard and kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And can be very lonely. And so I didn't want that. It wasn't this bright, shiny object for me, but it was, so I didn't think that I was like, oh, I'm so cool that I'm on this tour. Like, I didn't even want to tell people at college, it wasn't like this big deal, but it was just an environment to kind of begin to discover, I think, who I was. And the last year that I was on that as well, I was there for 5 years on the Revolve tour. And then I also got to speak, and they wanted me to speak about divorce and what it's like to kind of be a divorced kid. And I said yes with like tremendous fear and trembling, because I knew, for me, I take like a yes very seriously. And so I knew if I was saying yes to speak, it would mean that I had to deal with stuff that I really didn't want to deal with yet. And I am glad for that opportunity, because I don't know if I would have had the courage to do the level of counseling and self-work that the summer before spoke. I moved to Nashville that summer, and I knew I had some friends down here, and I moved here just for the summer, and found this incredible counselor here in town who only really works with artists and their families, which was amazing, because there was a whole layer of stuff I didn't have to talk about, right? Yeah. Like, there was this like just understanding, and his name's Al Andrews, and I, went once or twice a week that whole summer, and I didn't have a job that summer, because I knew my job was to prepare to speak, and I worked throughout the whole school year, so I was able to kind of make that work, and just did some pretty intense counseling, had really hard conversations with my parents, had to confront, I never had a full-blown eating disorder, but I had very disordered eating as a way to maybe control things in my life that I felt were out of control. And the conversation that really changed my mom's and my life was, I came back from a counseling session, and it was really hard. And I threw open the cabinets to kind of just start binging on food. And I was kind of a little bit more of like an exercise bulimic. I would never purge throwing up, but I would be at the gym for hours, or I would just work out just way past the point of what was normal, but I would binge. So my body shape didn't change at all really, but just emotionally it was a whole control thing. And so I remember so vividly, I like threw open the cabinets, and I was just going to eat anything I saw. And and it was like the Holy Spirit. Without even realizing it, I had picked up my phone, and I called my mom, and she answered. And we just kind of sat there in the silence, and I just said, like, I need to have the conversation with you as a 4-year-old who's really hurt. And she said, okay. And we talked, and it was so awkward and so good and so hard and beautiful and terrible. It was like all the things, but just the timing kind of set up there to say things that I had needed to say, and for us to talk together, and for me to let her in, which I hadn't for, 16 years or whatever that was at that point. And so that's a lot of information and probably very deep. So
no, it's so, you've had me in tears like 5 different times, but I just think just the redemptive nature of the story and what God has done is so beautiful. And there are so many parts of your story that have just hit even in my own life that I'm like holding it together as you're talking through it. And I was like, okay, yep, I'm going to lose it. So man, that's after college, all of those things. Fast forward a little bit for me.
Yeah.
Because you have kids now and
Yes.
you're married.
Yes.
So how do we get from, that conversation, having the 4-year-old conversation, not at 4, but with your mom, to how do you go from that to having like a healthy marriage and family?
It's a great question. So I ended up kind of speaking that year on the Revolve tour, and that was a really great thing for me. And that was my senior year of college, and that was my last year on the Revolve tour. And then as I was kind of trying to figure out what to do next, my major was music business. I have never felt super confident in my singing voice, not in a bad way at all, of just, I think too, like, there are not many voices like Sandy Patty. And so sometimes it's hard to like not compare yourself to her or think that people expect you to sing like her. So I just never really expected that with my life I would be singing. And so I did music business, and I love the business side of things. I love numbers. I love like strategy. I love communications. I love like all the business side. So I figured I would probably maybe work in the music business and more in the business side. So that was my major. I had moved to Nashville the summer after my junior year, or sophomore year, and the summer after my junior year, just for those summers, because I knew some people here. Wasn't trying to make it, just thought it'd be nice to have like a change, and really started getting connected at my church now, Christ Church, Nashville. And so I moved here, and I worked like 5 jobs when I first moved here, trying to figure out like, what am I going to do? I didn't have rose-colored glasses. I knew that you had to be in Nashville for a while, do the hard work, earn your keep, before even a business job, would open up. And I was maybe too strong in not wanting to lead with my mom's name. I wanted to prove that I was capable as a person. So I worked my freaking butt off when I moved here, with like every job from like sales calls, cold calls, which is a joy, to working at a cooking school and all kinds of things. And in that process, I started to volunteer more and more for my church here, leading worship. And I just love leading worship. I mean, being a lead worshiper is my heartbeat. And so the church kind of, I think, saw that and gave me opportunities to develop that, which I still am stunned that, for a young female that's in Nashville and at a church specifically known for its music, to have that opportunity to kind of learn and fail as you go and figure it out as you go is amazing. So I've been on staff here now in various capacities for the last like 6 years or so. And then I do some kind of singing work in the studio as well, like demos for people or different kind of vocal session stuff in town. But I don't have any sort of intention of like making it. I don't really want to make an album or something. I love like pastoring people and teaching and worship. So I lived here. One of the jobs that I took was traveling for Women of Faith as the merch team. So that's an interesting thing, but I loved it. You go from like singing and speaking on the stage, and then I needed a job, and a job that was available was traveling and selling merch. And I loved it. And it totally, I'm sure probably I had some fleshly thoughts of like, oh, this is maybe a demotion, but I think it's so important to like be in the season that you're in and let it be as full as possible. So much of where I learned to teach and connect with people was on that kind of merch team. And I traveled there for a couple years, and I kind of took it on myself to kind of create a like Bible study every week for the merch team, because you're on the front lines there, like with all the guests, and you are working like crazy. And I just really saw a need for kind of discipleship among that group. Not that they weren't amazing, because they were amazing, but this I saw on the other side for the artists, they get, these green room times and these prayer times and these Bible study times, but the people who are up there don't as much. So for a couple years I did that, and that was kind of, I don't know why I did that or what made me think I should do it, but it taught me so much. And I'm so glad I just was like, okay, I'm going to find where my gifting fits in this season of my life. But my roommate on that tour, so this is connecting, she was from Texas. She's now my sister-in-law. And she was from Texas and went to college with somebody who she thought that I would work well with, who lived in California at the time. So she pestered me for a year while we traveled to meet Scott. I was really not interested. I was terrified of marriage. I didn't think I would maybe get married, but I think that was out of fear more than anything. And I just was kind of loving my life of doing whatever I wanted, working like crazy. It was kind of like, I don't need that necessarily. So for a year, she pestered me. And finally, I started talking to him. And we talked for like long distance for our first conversation. Our first conversation on Skype was like me, basically trying to push him away. Like I was drilling him with all the questions. I was like, so what do you think about women in ministry? And what do you think about, having kids? And what do you think about working? And what do you think about like roles, for husbands and wives? I mean, I was like crazy person, like
to be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
Like, who did I think I was? But I was kind of like, I was like, I don't really care about like having a relationship right now, so I don't want to waste my time.
Yeah.
And B, I'm sure that underneath all that was just so much fear, and it was like, I'm going to push you away before you can even come close. And so, but he was awesome, and we dated long distance for 9 months, and we met in Colorado for the first time a few months into dating, and his brother lived there, and I had a friend that lived there, so it was like mutual territory. We had places to stay, and it wasn't kind of in our stomping grounds. And he was just really intentional, but gave me space, and just really pursued me so unbelievably well. And I tried to run away so much because I was terrified of marriage, and I was terrified of being hurt, and I was terrified of hurting. Both of those were so strong in me. I saw that in both of my parents in different ways, both of them. And I just was so scared. And he just was really patient with me, and different people kind of spoke into us. And I was at our church, and a lady I didn't know very well, we're really good friends now, she came up to me when I was kind of thinking about ending it. She came up to me from across the church at the end of the church service, and she like had a word from the Lord for me that was so pivotal. And she said, I don't know you very well, and I know you're kind of in this relationship, but I don't really know anything about it, and I feel really awkward saying this, but I just feel like the Lord wants me to tell you, how can a flower bloom in soil that is so hard that it can't even allow roots to go down? And he just might be using that analogy for you, that he's trying to do everything to allow something really beautiful to grow. The soil of your heart is so firm and kind of impenetrable, and that he's kind of asking you to open it. And I was like, and I'm just weeping like a crazy person. Like,
I was going to say, you had to have cried.
I mean, I'm sure I looked like an insane person. Then I still kind of had to choose to like let him in, but I tried to keep remembering that I was scared of marriage, and I wasn't scared of him. But even when he asked me to marry him, and it was like the most perfect proposal of all time, and I realized what was happening, and I was like, I'm not ready. And he said, yes, you are. Yes, you are. I'm not ready. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And I didn't even say yes. I was so scared of even saying yes. And it was so weird because I had peace, but like the fear was so intense, and it was like just this battle in my brain and my heart in that time. But like I intentionally never said yes when he asked me to marry him. And I kind of was like, he was like, so is that but I started crying, and my body just like fell into him, and I like gave him a hug, and he had hired somebody to like take pictures. So I like look back at all this now, and I see every minute of my emotions, but I see even in my body language, like I knew that it was good, but I was just so scared to let go. And he was just sweet and patient. And he just said, so is that a yes? And I kind of said, uh-huh. And it was like this weird thing. But it wasn't that I felt pressured. It was like, I knew it was right. I just was scared. And so, we had lots of marriage counseling and really had to address a lot of that. And my pastor was really amazing. My pastor in Nashville has a lot of background as a therapist, like as a clinical therapist. And so he really kind of dove in with us and helped us so much. And then I was really scared, honestly, right up until our wedding day. And then on our wedding day, I woke up with just more peace than I've ever experienced in my life. And I felt like the delight of the Lord on that wedding day. And it was just so redemptive for me on lots of different levels. One thing that my husband always tells me when I get stuck in my head, or when I'm like, I don't know what God wants, and especially in that season, he's always like, the Holy Spirit leads in peace. He's never going to lead in anything but peace. So process all the anxiety that you need to, process all the fear that you need to. But just remember, if you're asking what God is saying to you, that the Holy Spirit leads in peace. And that's been like something he has to remind me of all the time. And so, it's been a very redemptive process. And we're such a great team. We're very different. But it works really well. And he loves my family. I mean, my family has lots of unique things about it. We're very intense. We are very loud. We are just intense. And you won't find people who love each other as much or who have just such intense outbursts too with each other, or I don't even know how to explain it. And the first time he met my family, there was a gigantic blow up, not with me, but with different people in my family, and, doors slamming and yelling and stuff. And he just handled it perfectly. And then my mom kind of came into me and him just trying to process what had happened. And Scott just naturally gave her a hug, and just his presence is very calming, and kind of just without being asked, prayed over the situation, and was just, but he loves the craziness. And I'm like, how in the world does this work? So anyways, it's been a great thing. And our son is 2, and his name is Aiden, and his name means fire. And the Lord kind of prophetically gave us that name for him in a very weird way. And he lives up to that name in every way. So anyways, I've talked so long, and I'm so sorry. I'm embarrassed how long I've talked.
Do not at all be embarrassed, because I am loving every second of it. In fact, I can't even cut it short because I have to rewind. You literally described it as the most perfect proposal of all time. And now I just want to know what it was.
I have to know what it is. I know, which I wasn't even deserving of this beautiful proposal with all my fear. But so he had gotten this barn, it's cliche kind of, that was decked out in these beautiful lights that he had found somewhere. And he had planned it. He was so intentional about not lying. So he never wanted to lie, but that was very important to him. And so he, for weeks before, he had moved to Nashville at the time and was staying somewhere, in somebody's random room in their house of somebody in our church. He lived there until he got married. He kept trying to, for a month, say, I just love to take these drives in the country, which he does. But it was also that then when it was the time, I wouldn't be surprised. And so we were going somewhere to meet friends, which we did meet friends. So he wasn't lying. He was like, well, we're kind of early. Let's just take a drive. And so he just drove, and then all of a sudden he turned into this house, and he likes looking at houses. So I was like, oh gosh, we got to turn around. They're going to think we're trespassing. And then he had this Bose speaker underneath his seat with music perfectly timed, and he pressed play. I was like, this is weird. And he parks, and he kind of gets out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And he has this, it's a speaker that can kind of fit in his pocket, and it's perfectly planned.
What is it playing?
He was mainly playing, there's a Bethel album that's called Without Words. And so it's these beautiful kind of orchestral songs, but they just have so much texture, and they're beautiful. And so he had kind of I think a lot of them were from there, but he had specifically planned it. And so it was just the two of us, and it was this beautiful barn, and he kind of brought me in there, and it's stunning, really, really nice. And there was 2 layers, and then I could hear clicks. So he had hired a photographer to be there, and there are all these lights everywhere. And I was freaking out so much. I don't remember what he said. I know it was really great, but then it was the whole exchange of I'm not ready. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And then he kind of, after he asked want me to marry him. And he said he like had it all planned to like the music, which is hilarious to me. It's amazing, but he's not the most musical person in the world. So I'm like, that's a lot of thought, man.
Yeah.
And then he had like, I love cheese and like really good bread, kind of an antipasto platter, which sounds silly, but I love that. And so he had like gotten this incredible spread of stuff that he had like ready and like had this like picnic then after. And then, so that was like amazing. Every detail was planned like so perfectly and so intentionally. And he like bought certain things for the proposal that we could have like for, you know, our life, and like this really fancy cheese board, which is silly, but was something I loved, you know. Then he was like, well, you know, we had this dinner plan, so let's go ahead and go, you know. And then we get somewhere and he had told all my family and his family and the family that could from 6 different states had flown or driven in. And they were all here. Like my 6-week-old nephew was here, and he had this huge meal prepared there of like where we all like were. And so I was like, man, I'm really glad that I, you know, didn't say no. But the best part is I was so jittery. And so after I kind of said, he had like these beautiful candles everywhere. And I was just shaking because I was just overcome with it all. Yeah. And so we were sitting down to kind of like eat a little something. And I just kind of was scooting my chair closer to him. And I knocked the table over, and these gigantic candelabras came. There's a video of it. Maybe I'll send it to you.
Please send it to me.
These gigantic candelabras like fell over. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we are going to burn down this barn. And it's somebody who's like somewhat famous in Nashville. It was their barn. So like it was like just this, like it was, you know, somebody's that they use for events all the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to burn this barn down. And finally, like, I mean, it didn't catch anything on fire. They had this like old lace, like tablecloth that was on there, and somehow it didn't get on there, but it covered him in wax. So we get to this party and he is like covered, drenched in like dried wax. And he's just kind of like, okay. But what was great about it is like, that's what I needed. I needed to laugh, and I just belly laughed like from my depths. And in some ways it was like, again, the things that you think are going to be the worst parts of the story end up being the best parts of the story. Yeah. Because it freed my emotions up that were so just going crazy in my mind. I could just laugh and realize like, this is peaceful and good and joyful, and I don't feel pressured to marry him. I don't feel, you know, I mean, this is so good. And so that moment, you know, now is like what we talk about all the time, but
I'm going to need photos.
Okay.
I'm going to need videos.
There is a video. There's actually a video, and you hear my like awkward laughter, but
I'm so excited right now to see this video. Oh, okay, girl. First of all, your story. Thank you for being willing to share. I just think, you know, if this never ever released, I feel like God knew that I needed to have this conversation today. And I will not get choked up right before I wrap up an episode. That would be totally that would be embarrassing. Somebody knock over a candle or something. So, oh gosh, I hate that I even have to wrap it up because I'm like, I could ask so many more, but I promised you that you were going to be my second guinea pig in the rapid fire question round. I need to like name it. Maybe someone can help me name this, but it's really like random facts about you. Okay.
Okay.
So definitely don't need to overthink them, but, and hopefully none of them offend you.
Those are awesome disclaimers. I'm not scared at all.
I know, right? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Okay, so number 1, this is a preference. Would you prefer texting or phone calls?
Texting all the way. I'm an introvert, and like talking is stressful.
I am with you. I'm an extrovert, and I still like texting better. What is your favorite holiday?
I mean, I know it's cheesy, but it has to be Christmas because of like just all the season. But I also love New Year's just introspectively of like getting a chance to think about what the next year is going to be like, reflect on the other. So, I mean, I love the winter, and I love just everything about Christmas as well. So.
You are my spirit animal. Okay. You're going on a long road trip. Are you going to drive or do you prefer to ride?
So my husband is very intense, but not intense, but he loves to drive. He gets very angsty when he's not driving. Normally, though, I love to drive. So if it's that like a solitary road trip, that's my jam. But probably I'm riding because
I feel the need to tell you that if it's a solitary road trip, you better be driving.
I know, touche. I was just thinking about like how magical that sounded.
Well, if we get those self-driving cars, then I guess then you can have the option.
Ooh, that might stress me out. I don't know if I'm going to do that.
That would absolutely stress me out. Okay, I will actually say I did not know you were Sandy Patty's daughter. I literally knew nothing. But I put down favorite musician or song.
Ooh, my favorite lyricist of all time is Nicole Nordeman.
Oh,
She gave me so much voice to things I didn't even know I wanted to say. But then my favorite musician, she mentored me without knowing it as a lead worshiper, is Darlene Check. Just especially with I devour anything of her teaching about, about leading worship and all of that. So those would be my two, I think.
Absolutely. I now need to know, who's your celebrity crush?
Oh gosh, do I have it? Do you know my celebrity crush was, especially before I was married, because I was certain I was going to marry somebody who was not white. Like my whole family knew, and I am now with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Texan. So that's, so my celebrity crush for a very long time was definitely Taye Diggs.
Nice. I was going to say, you're probably safer only giving us the one from before you were married.
I know.
I love it. Okay, final one. What is your favorite junk food?
Ooh, man, what is my favorite junk food? Those like Trader Joe's chocolate covered peanut butter filled pretzels.
Stop it.
Danger.
I'm not, Jen.
Danger.
We're the same human being.
Are we? I love it. So I need to come to the Northeast now and visit.
Okay. Not even kidding. Not even kidding. To say that this has been a joy would be an understatement. But Jen, thank you so much for being on today. This was such a gift.
Thank you so much. And I know I went kind of deep, so I hope that was okay. But
I loved every second of it.
Well, thank you.
I know that you loved Jen's story and just the journey that God has had her on. There are so many things. And so I decided, once again, I'm going to take one thing that didn't only stand out to me, but is something that's kind of been cycling in my brain. And it's the part of the story where she shared how she decided to join the Women of Faith merch team. First of all, I love that decision, but more because I just felt this kindred spirit connection with her as far as her desire to just do different things. I'm so that person that just has the most random, definitely the most random resume as far as little odd jobs here and there. And I love it. Like all trying different things, learning different things. But my favorite part of that story was when she talked about this idea, and this is what we are so much about at Hey Girl, is what does it look like for you to let whatever season you're in just be as full as it can be. And for her at that time, as she was cranking away, selling merch, and she decided, you know what, I'm going to put together a Devo for the other women who are also serving merch, because that is something where, like she said, the speakers and all of that, they kind of have their community, but this is its own kind of separate thing. It was an opportunity. And so she did it, and she invested in these women as she was selling merch and really just embraced the whole thing. And she acknowledged the fact that it could have been really easy in her flesh to feel like this was a step backwards or a demotion, if you will. But rather than taking that perspective. Instead, she's like, this is a season right now where I have the opportunity to just live it to its fullest. God, what am I able to do here? How can I serve you best? And even her creativity in it, like, you know what I can do? I can create a Bible study. Like, I can create devotionals for these people I work with to encourage them. So not just something that impacted her and the kingdom, but encouraged the other people around her walking that same journey in that same season. I was so kind of blown away, but also it to me was just a reminder even now. I've said this about when I worked at the gym. I feel the same way now working for Chick-fil-A, even in, my son plays soccer, being on the soccer field. How can I live this season to the fullest? And so that's honestly our prayer for you all the time at Hey Girl, is that wherever you are right now, that is the prayer of your heart. That's the desire of your heart, that God, whether it's a season of celebration or difficulty, whatever it is, maybe it's one that makes a whole lot of sense. Maybe you're in a season that you're like, what in the world is going on right now? But rather than trying to get all the answers and figure it out or psychoanalyze how you ended up there, is just to pause and ask God, how can I serve you to the fullest in this time, exactly where I'm at, without trying to fix anything or better anything or, figure out the next step, but just live it out fully. I'd love to hear your answer on that. Would you do me a favor? If you're an Instagram person, can you follow me on Instagram? You'll find me, Bethany Needham, on Instagram, and then send me a DM. Let me know. What does that look like for you? What does living your season to the fullest? These are the kind of stories that just inspire me, and I get amped. So send me a message. If it's something that I feel like, gosh, this could be an encouragement to so many others, you may find me reaching out to ask if I could share your story of whatever it is that you write. But if you got a moment, I would love it. Follow me on Instagram, send a message, tell me right now in your life, first of all, what is the place God has you, and what does living it to the fullest look like for you? Maybe it's like, my gym season and learning how to roll towel animals while I'm standing behind the desk all day. Maybe it's like our friend Jenn today. You know what? I'm going to write devos and encourage these women that I'm working alongside of, selling this merch all day long. Whatever it is, I'd love to hear about it. So listeners, it's been another week, another amazing episode, really another amazing person, just walking their journey, following Jesus, being obedient to him along the way. And I just pray that this was an encouragement to you wherever you're at today, an encouragement for you to run your race in your place. Thanks for listening.